Hi everyone, Phil Magnotti here. I'd like to start by showing you my technique on how I EQ a kick drum. Not going to get into bass drum triggering or sampling. We'll do that in the next video. Now, bass drum equalization is going to vary greatly from the different kinds of music that you will be doing. This is a typical pop song, a lot of tracks, and I want just a really good, punchy, tight-sounding kick drum that has definition to it. Let's play a little bit of the track and you can hear the bass drum in with the rest of the song. This kick drum fits this song very nicely. Punchy low end, tight, and a little bit of transient on the top to cut through the track. Let me go ahead and solo the drums. Kick drum, snare drum, hi-hat. Add the toms, overheads, and the room. So it's a really nice sounding drum kit, very balanced within itself. Let's go ahead and I'm going to solo the kick drum and show you what I'm doing equalization wise. So here's the bass drum soloed with the EQ in. And for this song I'm using the Sony Oxford EQ. Any good 3-band equalizer would work. I'm going to solo the bass drum and bypass the EQ. Not a very good sound, very lackluster, a lot of mid-range. Let's unbypass the EQ now. Big difference. And as you can see without the EQ, it's not a very good sound for this track, but it is workable. And you'll see here there's a big mid-range cut. And by cutting out the mid-range, this will work 99% of the times to get the bass drum in the ballpark. I usually go anywhere from 300 around here to about 500 and do a drastic cut. I am using a high band and a low band, but let's bypass them for now so you can hear what the mid-range is doing. Let's play a little and A-B the mid-range in and out. And you can see how that tightens it up right away. Let's go ahead now and add the low band. And there's your low end punch. Now let's talk about the frequency of the low end. I usually go from anywhere from about 60 all the way up to, let's say, about 100. Now this all depends upon the track, style of music, and engineer's preference. I like to look at this in two ways. Either I EQ the bass drum to be lower in the harmonic spectrum than the bass guitar, or higher in the harmonic spectrum than the bass guitar. Now what this does is it'll keep the bass drum and bass guitar away from each other frequency-wise, and this will give your mix a nice balanced low end and not become muddy because the bass drum and the bass guitar will not be fighting for the same frequency. Now in this mix, I have the bass drum below the bass guitar. Let's now solo the bass drum and find the sweet spot for this particular bass drum. Let's go down to about 60, 50, up to around 80, 100's too high. So I think right around 70 hertz is a sweet spot for this bass drum. And you can hear the difference when I was going up and down in the frequency. It changes the timbre a lot. Now, of course, it has to do with the initial tuning of the bass drum and size also. So here it is in, out, in. And you can hear how this is working with the mid-range cut that we did earlier. Let's move on to the high band and get this tuned in. Again, we will do the same procedure by moving the frequency around, overboosting it, and hear where the sweet spot is for this drum. It's too low. I like this around 5K. Now, again, this is going to vary drastically for the genre of music you're doing. If it was a heavy metal record, a prog record, you can sometimes see 15 dB of boost here. Bypass the whole EQ. So you can hear how just these 3 bands of EQ make such a huge difference in the sound of this bass drum. Remember, no matter how good it sounds soloed, it has to work in the track. Let's listen to it in the track. Let's take the EQ out. In. Now I'm going to tune the high end of this bass drum to the track a little bit better so we can get a little bit more definition. Again, nobody's ever going to hear the drum solo, so it has to work together with the entire mix. Go back to the mid-range. And for now, this sounds pretty good. So let's just recap a little bit. Of course, if this was a different type of song, if it was a heavy metal song, progressive rock song, the high end or attack on the kick drum would be much more pronounced in order to cut through, let's say, 6 or 7 tracks of heavily distorted guitars. But for this song, this works just fine. And again, I will go back as I progress in the mixing of the song and fine-tune the frequencies of the bass drum in order for it to sit nicely with the other instruments in the mix. In this video, we just touched upon equalization of the bass drum. In the next video, I'd like to go ahead and show you how I re-trigger bass drums and use it in addition to an acoustic bass drum sound.